Are you taking the ACT soon and want to learn how to crush the ACT reading test and get a perfect score? If so, in this video, I'm going to share some of my best strategies, tips, and tricks that have helped many of my students score perfectly on the ACT reading. Now, if you're asking yourself, why am I qualified to give you this advice? Well, I've been a full-time test prep tutor for the last 9 years. I've scored perfectly on every single ACT reading on the released ACTs since 2016, and more importantly, I know how to teach this test. In 2022, 4 of my students achieved a perfect 36 on the entire test, and I had 13 students get a perfect 36 on the reading. Now, in the rest of this video, I'm going to share 5 of my best tips that are going to help you understand the reading test at a really high level and prepare you to get a perfect score. I'm also going to show you the resources that I use to help my private tutoring students achieve those perfect 36s. And additionally, I'm going to share some free resources that you can use on your own to get ready for test day. Tip number 1 is understand the test. What I mean by that is we need to start with the basics of understanding how the reading test works before we can jump into the more advanced tips here. Now, many students struggle with ACT reading for 3 reasons. Number 1, they struggle with strategically how should I approach the passages. Number 2, they struggle with time management. And number 3, they struggle with what makes answers right versus wrong. Now, the most important thing I want you to understand about the ACT is the ACT reading is just like a Where's Waldo. What I mean by that is all the evidence that tells you which answers are correct is straight in the passage. What I always tell my students is you can put your finger directly right on the evidence. What that means is there's no storytelling, there's no half-right answers, there's no spinning answers. Whenever you find the right answer in the passage, it should be super clear that you can literally put your finger on it and go, that's it, that's why my answer is correct. Tip number 2 is find your best strategy. I teach 6 different approaches for how to handle the ACT reading test, but I want to be clear that none of them is the best approach. All of the approaches helped my students in 2022 achieve a 36. But again, there's no best approach. What is important is I want you to try and find the best approach for you. The best way to do that is do practice tests, try different approaches until you find one that you like. Once you find one you like, stick to it and practice it over and over. What you can see on the screen now is from my ACT reading book, which has over 100 pages and includes everything I teach my students about ACT reading to help them get those perfect scores. Now, this approach here is called Label, Then Read. And this is one that I think I created, never seen anywhere else, but it's one that really helps a lot of students. What we're going to do here is we're actually going to go to the questions first, but I don't want you reading all the questions. All we're doing is we're going through the questions quickly with our eyes, and we're looking for any questions that reference a specific line or paragraph, and we're going to label where those questions are. So I'm going to go down to a passage I've already labeled up for us. So what I would do here is I would go straight to the questions, and if you look at these questions down here, you can pretty quickly see, boom, numbers, numbers, numbers. You just kind of let your eyes go, and you're going to find those numbers pretty quickly. It's not super difficult. What we're going to do, as we find the numbers, we're going to go ahead and label them. Now, once you've labeled them up, it'll probably take you maybe 10, 15, 20 seconds. Now we're going to go ahead and read the passage. And this is the second thing I want you to do with this method is I want you to pre-read the questions. So before we even start this paragraph, we know question 11 is coming up right here. So you can go ahead and read question 11, and then you can start reading the paragraph. You'll already know ahead of time kind of what you're looking for, which will make it easier and faster to answer question 11. We can do the same thing with 16. Once we get to the second paragraph, we can look for 13 and keep going through this process. So as you can see, this should save you in terms of time management because you're going to be answering questions as you read, and you'll be able to answer these faster because you've just read them. If you were reading the whole passage in one big go, you might be wasting time by having to come back and reread these. It's also going to give you some breaks along the way. So if you find yourself having trouble staying focused and doing this in one big go all the way through, this should really help you out. If you want to read more of all the details on these pages, I'll kind of scroll back to the front. So you can basically pause the screen and you can kind of start reading through all these different tips and rules for knowing exactly how to go through and apply this label and read method. Tip number 3 is know how to spot the easy questions. Did you know the ACT actually tells you which questions are the easiest with some certain special words in the questions? This is another tip you're not going to find anywhere else on YouTube. So what you're looking for is any of these words. If you see these words in a question, it's what I like to call a clear evidence question, which means the answer choice is going to be stated directly in the passage. Whichever one is correct is going to be a simple restatement or rephrasing of what you found in the passage. It might even be the exact same thing. Tip number 4 is skip the broad passage questions and save them for last. A lot of times in the ACT, you'll see a passage that looks like the one right next to me here, and the very first question is going to ask you about the main idea or the main purpose or something that has to do with the entire passage. Many students make a mistake by answering these right away. The problem with doing that is, number 1, it's going to take you a lot of time. You're probably going to have to go back and look over the passage. And number 2, you're more likely to get this wrong. So what I want you to do is skip these, do the rest of the questions, and come back at the end. by doing the rest of the questions, you're going to understand the passage better, so you're more likely to get these questions right, and you're also going to be able to do them faster, which of course is saving you time. Tip number 5 is learn to pace yourself correctly. ACT reading is really hard in terms of time management. You have 4 long passages, 10 questions each, and you have, to be exact, 8 minutes and 45 seconds per passage. You can think of this as 9 minutes. On test day, every time at the end of a passage, once you're done with all 10 questions, make sure you wear a watch, check your watch, see where you're at. It'll give you an idea if you're ahead of pace, behind pace, or on pace. Additionally, I advise students to follow what I call the 30-second rule, which is basically, if you're on a question for too long, have that little shot clock in your head. If it's taking you more than 20 or 30 seconds, you're looking, you can't find that Waldo, just move on. As you do the rest of the questions, you might just come across it, or you can always just bubble in a placeholder, circle the number. If you're guessing on that question, you're not sure. I'd rather you finish all 40 questions and come back to some you guessed on along the way than run out of time and have to guess on the last 5 or 6 questions. That approach of taking some educated guesses and moving on more quickly is going to help you answer all 40 questions and get a higher score. If you're really aiming for a 36, this is a great place to start, but you really need to understand much more in depth about the test. You have to really understand the test at an expert level. If I'm working with my students in private tutoring sessions, we usually spend around 3 to 5 hours really diving into the reading and understanding it, and then of course they do much more practice to get to their best scores ever. To get really good at reading, there's lots of intricacies. You have to understand how to really break down the passages, how to best read the questions, how to use your answer choices to the advantage, how to approach the questions mentally, learn to use the keywords, how to skim effectively, and of course, much, much more. So this is why in my Ultimate ACT Reading course, it's over 10 hours of videos of me teaching you basically everything that I've got. You can, of course, learn much of this stuff on your own, but I've tutored this for thousands of hours, perfected how to teach it and kind of my methods, so I can really just shortcut your ability to get to those top scores that, of course, you were aiming for. That being said, if you want to go about this and do this for free, let me give you guys some advice on my recommendations. Number 1, I like to recommend that students start with what I'll call the 9-minute drill. What the 9-minute drill is instead of doing your reading all the way through in one big go, we're going to break it and do it one passage at a time, and you're going to set a timer for 9 minutes, because 9 minutes, it's technically 8 minutes 45 seconds, but 9 minutes is basically your pace. So what that'll do is, number 1, it'll get you used to the pacing of the test, which is going to really, really help on testing. Number 2, what we're doing with the 9-minute drill is you're going to do one passage, set a timer for 9 minutes, and then when you're done, you're going to check your answer choices right away, and then you're going to go back, and for questions you missed, you're going to try and analyze why you got that wrong. And if you got it wrong, you're going to take some notes as far as exactly why you got it wrong, what your mistakes were, what you can do better next time, and you're going to kind of workshop that until you get, of course, better. And then once you feel comfortable with that, you can expand back to doing an entire passage all the way through. My final piece of advice here in this video is I want you guys to all think independently as you're doing your ACT reading prep. Figure out what works for you, practice that, and become an expert at your method. Just because one of your friends who got a perfect score tells you the way they did reading, or you see a video on YouTube or TikTok, or you hear from your tutor, hey, this is the best way to do it, they're generally full of it. There's a ton of people I've watched videos and tutorials where the advice and the methods they're giving are actually really bad. So make sure that as you're going through, you really do think, okay, does this approach make sense? Is this helping me? And if it isn't, think independently. Again, find what works for you. Other than that, I hope you guys really enjoyed the video. If you guys have any questions about ACT reading or study tips or anything else ACT related, please let me know in the comments down below. I promise I will respond to those, and I'm happy to help you guys on your journey to some great ACT scores. Other than that, be sure to subscribe. I've got lots more ACT videos coming out, new ones every single week. Other than that, this is Matt at PrepPros. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. See you next time.